Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Play on GAA podcast, another episode of the Club Roundup. This is a football edition and I'm joined once again by Luke, back from his holidays. Luke, how are you keeping?
All good, Seamus. Glad, happy to be back back into the swing of things here now, yeah.
Good stuff. Well, we have a lot to talk about, and the one that kind of jumps off the headline, Austin Stacks, back-to-back champions in Kerry, beating a fancied Kerrins O'Reilly's side in the final. They won by 13 points to 10. Bragging rights for Austin Stacks again. They proved themselves to be the best side in Kerry. Or do you think that they were just the most efficient side in Kerry?
Well, look, yeah, suppose you kind of look at with the structure down in Kerry, kind of the two championships and everything as well. They've won both as well. I think you can't deny that they're the best side in Kerry this year. And yeah, look, I suppose in the day they definitely deserved as well. Really kind of interesting game here as well, particularly the fact that these are the two kind of Tralee teams have ended up in the final against each other, something you kind of rarely see. But yeah, I think a lot of people were kind of maybe tipping Kerrins O'Reilly before the start of the game. But then, look, the tried and tested kind of Austin Stacks side that have kind of won so much in recent years ultimately came out on top. So yeah, it was another kind of typical kind of Stacks kind of performance where they grounded out. Probably not the most free-flowing game in the world ever again. But look, they're so effective, I suppose.
And talk to me, how big were the injuries? Because obviously Kerrins O'Reilly's, they lost Gavin O'Brien to a hamstring injury in the warm-up, and then very early on in the game, David Moran goes off injured. Just how big of an impact do you think that had on the game itself?
Yeah, look, well, it's absolutely huge. It's two kind of senior panelists there, particularly David Moran as well, has been one of the kind of key midfielders in the country, kind of at all levels, really. So to lose somebody like that, I think it was kind of reflected early on that, look, Austin Stacks kind of dominated from the start, and only kind of a late rally, I suppose, from Kerrins O'Reilly kind of pulled them back into it, and they ultimately finished up 3 points down. But losing two key players like that, you're going to be up against it straight away. So it's, look, there's no denying that that it made an absolutely huge difference. Whether though the addition of those two would have been enough for them to win it in the end, I'm not sure. I still think the Stacks are probably the best team in Kerry this year, but there is no denying that. And for the sake of the game, it is a bit of a disappointment for Kerrins O'Reilly that they couldn't give it a go kind of with the full complement.
Yeah, well, it definitely would have been interesting to see just how the game would have turned out if O'Reilly's were at their full peak of their powers. But now we were moving on quickly because we got a lot to get through. Austin Stacks going into the next round, and to be honest, they've a bit of a path now into the final. Not to be too disrespectful to Newcastle West, but Newcastle West had to grind out a 2-point victory over the Waterford champions, Denier. Obviously, Newcastle West, they have some good players in there. They've Ian Corbett, but I just think Austin Stacks maybe a step too far for them. But on the other note, congratulations to Newcastle West into a Munster football semi-final.
Yeah, they ultimately just about kind of got over the line against the Waterford champions Denier, kind of 8-6 they won, and it was very, very dramatic in the end, kind of when the Newcastle West goalkeeper had to make an absolutely huge save as Tom Barron nearly scored a goal to win it for them. So yeah, look, they just about kind of sneaked through, and but ultimately, like, I suppose you have to bear in mind as well, Newcastle West missing kind of Keane Sheehan as well, who's by far their kind of main man up front and everything as well. So it's they're going to have it all to do, I suppose, going in against Austin Stacks, and like they're coming up against a team that have so much kind of Munster Championship experience and everything as well. So I think based off that semi-final and kind of the form of the two teams, I'd be very, very hard pushed to bet against Austin Stacks emerging from that side of the draw anyway.
Yeah, when you look at Austin Stacks now, last week on the club roundup, Matt was saying that he didn't rate Austin Stacks forwards as much. But which of the Austin Stacks forwards did you kind of notice in the O'Reilly's final that you think maybe will give Newcastle West the most trouble?
Well, look, I suppose, straight away, kind of when people look at that team, kind of obviously, yeah, Donaghy's the one that still everyone talks about, and although he's probably not as effective, still he is still the focal point of that attack. Still, you've got Darragh O'Brien beside him, who kind of kicks his frees well. Brendan O'Sullivan's got a fair bit of kind of experience playing for Kerry as well. It's kind of a solid outfit. There's no marquee player, I would say, that kind of you look at and think is going to notch maybe 4 or 5 points for you from playing a game. But I think, yeah, look, but especially with Darragh O'Brien and Brendan O'Sullivan. I think they're probably two solid players. And as well, you kind of factor in the likes of Barry Shanahan as well, and maybe Michael O'Gara too. That there's some really solid players in that team. And although there's no kind of real marquee player for them, it's just a strong collective, I would say, kind of. And ultimately, I suppose that probably should be enough for them in the next stage anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And I was saying the greatest strength that I think Austin Stacks have is they make teams play their game. And we have to give props to Kieran Dunn. He's still going strong at 38 years of age. The last team then to qualify for the Munster Football Semi Finals was Éire Óg in Clare. They beat Loughmore Castleiney by 2 goals and 11 points to 12 points, scoring the 2 goals in extra time, finishing Loughmore Castleiney off, who must be exhausted. But they're still in the hurling, which is absolutely remarkable. One of the achievements of the year, no doubt. What did you make of this game, and what did you make of Éire Óg's performance? They go in now to play against Finbar's, the Cork champions.
Yeah, well, look, I think Éire Óg have been kind of they're a well kind of fancied outfit, I suppose. And again, they were another team that could have been like Loughmore Castleiney, that probably fancied their chances of a double in both hurling and football, with a lot of shared players too as well. So they probably, going into the game, they weren't getting the same level of coverage that Loughmore were kind of getting. Obviously, Loughmore have been absolutely everywhere for the last couple of weeks with the storyline and the hurling, the football, winning both. But Éire Óg have pretty much nearly achieved something very, very similar, and bar kind of a narrow enough defeat, I suppose, to Ballier in the Clare Senior Hurling semi-final, they could be looking at the exact same situation. So I think it sums up kind of how strong that panel is as well. And again, though, this was a really entertaining kind of game. Went right down to the wire, and then I suppose just an extra time, Éire Óg kind of took over. Some people are probably going to look at that and then say, "Oh yeah, extra time." That Loughmore, because they've been so busy, that maybe Éire Óg's fitness stood to them. But I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I think at the same time as well, you look at the quality of player Éire Óg have available to them, particularly the likes of Aaron Fitzgerald, I think, from fullback. Conal O'Hanlon, Mark McInerney had a great game as well, and then Gavin Cooney. These are all players that have inter-county experience, and like you've kind of got some of the dual players like David Reedy in there as well. So it's I think that it's a really strong team, and I think they kind of might be dark horses in Munster. If you're looking at, they're going into a game against Finbar's next week. Well, the next week coming up, and I think they have a great chance of causing an upset there.
Yeah, and you're forgetting as well about Darren O'Neill. I just remember Darren O'Neill causing absolute carnage for Mayo in that league game back at the start of the season. He was just an absolute beast of a man. And he's there in midfield for Éire Óg, and he tends to dominate most games that he plays in. So just before we move on then from the Munster Championship, so we have our last four: Éire Óg, St. Finbar's, Austin Stacks and Newcastle West. Which one would you kind of tip now to go on and actually claim the Munster crown?
I kind of have a feeling that I think the winner of the Finbar's and Éire Óg game might actually win Munster. I think Stacks have they've been solid in recent years, but they kind of haven't really got over the line really when it came to Munster. And I think that Finbar's and Éire Óg game could be absolutely huge. And I think whoever comes out of that actually would be my favourites to win Munster. Probably a bit of a surprise, I think. But I just don't really fancy Stacks, I think, in Munster to win it, although they were solid and everything as well. I'm not sure if the quality of kind of the Kerry Championship right now is at its kind of absolute peak. So yeah, they'd be the ones I'd be keeping an eye on. And I'm curious to kind of see how Finbar's are going to get on in Munster. They looked really impressive in Cork, and that they finally kind of came out of Cork and stuff as well. So just to see, I need to see how they get on against kind of Éire Óg in a Munster Championship game, kind of when all the pressure's on them, and then I'll be able to fully kind of be confident in my opinion here, I suppose. But I think between one of those two are going to win Munster, I reckon.
Yeah, I fully get where you're coming from. For me, it's between Stacks and Finbar's, and I think if Finbar's do beat Austin Stacks, then I can see them having a real crack at winning the All-Ireland, because as I said, Stacks force you to play their game. And a lot of people were tipping O'Rahilly's to beat Stacks in the final. I know things happened in the final, which definitely swung the momentum in Stacks' favour. But I just think they've a habit of just getting the win. And I think Finbar's, if they manage to beat Stacks, then I really think Finbar's are to be taken serious. So moving on from Munster football now, we're moving up to the Ulster Club Championship. And the result that really jumps off the script here is 100% Derry Gonley reaching the Ulster Semi Final after extra time. They beat the Tyrone champions Dromore. Now, the Tyrone Football Championship, rightly so, was heralded for its competitiveness, how the defending champions were knocked out so quickly. But Dromore, they get through that championship and then they lose. And then they lose in the next round to the Fermanagh champions. I have to say, I didn't see this one coming. Obviously, the late goal for Derry Gonley kind of finished Dromore off. But for me, this is definitely a bit of a shock.
Yeah, look, I suppose probably based off based off kind of all our informed this year, everyone's kind of immediately looking at the Tyrone champions and then thinking that up in Ulster for what they can do here. But ultimately, I suppose at the end of the day, Derry Gonley they've a fair bit of Ulster Championship experience. They've won a fair amount of Fermanagh championships in recent years, and some really established players. You look at the Joneses in that team as well. They've really been kind of around the block a few times, and that they know what they're doing up in there as well. And I think that experience ultimately showed as well. The other thing to kind of note here is that Derry Gonley lost Declan Cassidy to a red card in the 47th minute and still managed to kind of grind their way to extra time. And then once they kind of back to the full complement, I suppose they ultimately kicked on in that period of extra time. So it's kind of it's really interesting that you see teams kind of with talent like Dromore have, but they come up against these established kind of wily kind of teams that are consistently winning these Ulster kind of winter football games. And it just shows kind of that the power that experience can have in these competitions. So it's a fantastic result for Derry Gonley, and I think they're going to be a tough outside to overcome, but for everyone going forward. And it just shows kind of the strength, I think, of the Ulster Championship this year. You're looking at the provincial that is a provincial competition up there, and you're looking at some of the teams that are still left in it, and it's awfully hard to call who's going to win this.
Yeah, without doubt. And obviously, it was, in my opinion, the Stephen McGullion goal in extra time that really kind of sealed the victory for Derry Gonley. But I think at that point, it was already over. Like, Conal Jones had just nailed a free to push aside 4 points in front. Then Dromore obviously got a point back before the goal went in. But I mean, now going into this, I know you're not making excuses, but Emmett McNabb, a key forward for Dromore throughout the entire Tyrone Championship, he was forced off for most of the game. Do you think his inclusion would have made any difference?
Yeah, obviously, look, he shone so much, I think, in the in the Tyrone Championship, but as well, you have to factor in though the red card. I suppose I know that Dromore ultimately finished up with their down to 14 themselves, but they had every opportunity. They were an extra man there as well. I don't think they can really have too much kind of complaints about it as well. And ultimately, I suppose when it came down to it, that when Derry Gonley went down to the down to 14, they refused to panic, refused to kind of to change their game plan at all. And I suppose that I thought they were completely deserving of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it would be interesting to see how they get on in the next round. Speaking of teams making it through to the next round, the Down champions Kilcullen, who obviously made that final against Corofin in 2019, they beat Ramore United by 3-13 to a goal and 8. Jerome Johnston grabbed the headlines with a tally of 2 goals and 2 points. But Kilcullen, in my opinion, they just looked very impressive. Shut down Ramore United from early on. And what do you make of their chances after this game?
Yeah, well, this was kind of the most emphatic result, I think, up in Ulster. And I suppose you're looking at kind of at Kilcullen as well. They have a level of experience where they pushed Corofin so close in the last All-Ireland that was played. So when you're looking at a situation like that, when there's so many kind of new teams up in Ulster this year as well, some of the traditional powerhouses like Scottstown, all these are already, Slotneil as well, are no longer kind of factors this year. For one of the kind of the big traditional teams to put their hand up like that is really, really impressive. I think as well, some of the kind of the main men, the likes of Jerome Johnston, really stepping up again. And Caleb Doherty as well, I thought was also fantastic. So based off this, I suppose it's a big statement by Kilcullen, and as well, you're adding them into kind of, we've already talked about kind of Derry Gonley as well, and we're going to talk about the Glen now in a minute, and it's just another really, really strong kind of club side. And I think look, if some of these teams were in other provinces, I think they'd be walking other provinces, and I think it just sums up the strength of club football in Ulster right now.
Yeah, no doubt. And you just mentioned Glen there. They had a very emphatic win over Scottstown, the Monaghan champions. They won by 118 to 12 points. Malachi O'Rourke, of course, in charge of that Glen side. And I mean, they just have some names that just absolutely jump off the sheet. They've Conor Glass and Emmett Bradley in midfield. They've Kieran McFaul. They've Danny Talon. Serious strength throughout this Glen side. And they just swept a very talented Scottstown side. They just swept them aside. Obviously, the Hugheses are in the Scottstown team. You've got Rory Beggan in goal. And it looked easy for Glen. And going in against Kilcullen now, that's a mouth-watering clash.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, that's the one I think that to watch. And going into it, I kind of watching this game. I wanted to keep a close eye on the Glen because after beating beating Slot Neil, who dominated kind of Derry football for so long and had so much success, I was kind of curious to watch them. And based off this, kind of, I would be kind of a bit coy in saying it, but I think that the Glen would be my outside bet for the All Ireland based off this performance. And I think that I really think that they're strong enough to maybe overturn Kilcullen the next day. You've already talked about, but Conor Glass and Emmett Bradley is as good a midfield combination as you're going to see all across the country. They absolutely dominated. And Scottstown, with all the Hughes playing for them as well, in around midfield, they could not win their own possession from their kickouts. And look, they were destroyed in there as well. So, and you talked already about Kieran McFaul, kind of he drove forward from centre half back the entire day, kicked a fantastic score on his left foot as well. Also really was liked kind of Paul Gunning in the full forward line. Thought he won an awful lot of good ball in there as well. And then you have Danny Talon kind of kicking score. So I think there's no weaknesses to that Glen team. And with that midfield, look, they're going to dominate a fair amount of possession in there as well. And they really frustrate Scottstown. Obviously, we finished up with 13. Like you saw, Darren Hughes kind of was sent off when he completely lost his head, I suppose, after just because of how frustrated they'd been made by the Glen's performance. So, you're talking about that game against Kilcullen. It sounds nearly impossible kind of to predict because these two teams, their form is just ridiculous right now. They're both playing unbelievable football, and you've kind of looking at the Glen kind of coming in as a bit of an unknown quantity. They haven't been in Ulster, like in the latter stages of Ulster before, really. And whereas they're coming up against Kilcullen's side, who know exactly how to win games up there as well. So look, it's so hard to call. And I think that maybe whoever wins that game will be my early All Ireland final kind of All Ireland's favourites, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I just think Glen looks so impressive, and the strength and depth that they have is frightening, to be honest, for any team going up against them. And speaking then, the last team into the Ulster Football Championship semi-finals is Clon of Armagh, but by God, did they make it hard for themselves. They had to kick a free at the death to force extra time against the Antrim champions, Kickham's Cregan. Then they finished the job in extra time, winning the game by 3 points. But an absolute thriller this one was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's another fantastic game up in Ulster again, and it just shows kind of why it's the best championship right now. And so it's again going into the next round though for them, it's going to be an almighty task as well against Derry Gonley as well. So that's the thing for Clannad now. They emerged, I suppose, after an absolute bruise and kind of encounter. For them, Conor Tubbert's still probably the main man. Daniel McGee was really good. He kicked a goal in 3. So there's talent in this team as well. I think Barry McCambridge is a bit of inter-county experience too. And yeah, it's a good side. But they'll be coming up against Derry Gonley next week now, who are, and again, we've talked about this already, how established they are in Ulster club football. So I would probably be leaning Derry Gonley, I think, the next day out though.
Yeah, and just to talk about that Daniel McGee goal, that goal was the crucial goal in extra time. They won that game 2-14 to 17 points. But yeah, I'm the same as you. I think Derry Gonley, if they can beat Dromore, I think they can definitely beat Clon Aaron. And then that would send Derry Gonley into the final. But I think whoever comes out of the Kilcullen versus Glen game is my tip to win the Ulster Championship. So then, moving on from the Ulster Championship, we still have a lot to get through. The Leinster Club Championship. And the first game that we're going to talk about, Kilmacud Crokes, the Dublin champions, they had to graft to beat Wolf Tones of Meath. They won by 113 to 1-9. and Wolf Town's kind of fairy tale run through the championship has come to an end for this year.
Yeah, look, I think based off the start of the game, when Crokes were going 3 to a point up, it looked like they were going to kind of cruise away. And then after a goal kind of for Wolf Towns made by Keane O'Neill, I think that it kind of became a bit more of a dogfight, very close to half time. And then Crokes kind of kept them at arm's length then. And then obviously the red card for Keane Ward, I suppose, at the end was pretty much confirmed as it is. Business-like performance by Crokes without being too impressive. I thought they were nearly a bit too reliant on Mannion at times. Like he was absolutely sensational again. He kicked 6 points, 5 of them were from play, and pretty much all 5 of them were trademark cutting in on the left foot boot from about the 45 and just ridiculous scores. So yeah, look, they were absolutely kind of that was kind of the big thing to take from this game, I thought, was Mannion's performance. And yeah, I think for teams going forward in the next stage now, they'll be looking at this now and they'll be saying that if I know it's a big if, but if you can take Mannion out of a game and you can at least kind of slow him down, is there kind of enough outside of him in that forward line for Crokes maybe to go too far in the All Ireland? I'm not fully sure. So
yeah, well, if you look at the last time Crokes were beaten in Leinster, it was by Mullinachta, and that day Patrick Fox kept Paul Mannion scoreless from play, and then Mullinachta went on to win. So I think there's definitely a good point in what you're saying. And the other teams that have got through the quarterfinals, Shelmaliers, the Wexford champions, they beat Naomh Máirtín, the Louth champions, by 2-6 to 1-7. Naas of Kildare, they battered Blessington of Wicklow 4-11 to 1-7. And Portarlington, the Laois champions, beat the Westmeath champions St. Lomans 1-14 to 1-12. Are there any of these sides that you can see kind of being able to do that to Mannion and do that to Crokes?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose next up for Crokes will be Portarlington. And I think it's kind of in recent years now, look, Portlaoise have traditionally dominated Laois. And I suppose the last couple of times, Portarlington have absolutely dominated kind of the Laois Championship the last 2 or 3 times now. So it'll be an interesting one to see how they can get on against Crokes. Maybe looking at their backline, maybe Robbie Piggott will probably pick up Mannion. It's a solid team kind of for Portarlington, but whether they get over the line against Crokes, I probably don't think so. I think I'd probably be backing Crokes to maybe be able to grind out with the strength of their kind of midfield and everything as well. I'd be backing them to probably grind out a victory there. And then in the other side, look, Naas, I think, are probably the other team that are the really interesting one right now in Leinster. I think the mad part about it is that they're still without a manager, they're still player led and everything as well. It's a really, really rare situation. But look, they had a very comfortable win over Blessington at the weekend. In the game, they're probably expected to win. But they have a very strong side. You look at Eamon Callaghan's still playing amazing stuff. Probably he's about at the age of 40 now at this stage, but he's still playing huge stuff. And he's nearly that manager figure for them. They've Dara Kerwin, Luke Griffin had a huge game as well at the weekend. So there's a lot of talent in that team. Owen Doyle as well, you have to mention, of course. So I think they'd be the team I'd be looking at as well. In Leinster, I think I'd fancy them to get over the line against Shelmaliers. And yeah, I think a Crokes Naas final is what's probably most likely. I'd be curious what you think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Portarlington will put up a good fight against Crokes, but I just think Crokes have too much in the tank. And then I do see Naas overcoming Shelmaliers in the other semi-final to set up that Naas versus Crokes final, one which I would tip Kilcullen Crokes to win and then be the Leinster champions. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think I think Naas are a good side, but yeah, I think when it comes to an arm wrestle in a game like that as well, I do think that the Naas's lack of a kind of manager will probably start to become a factor when they come up against the top teams. You look at the strength of the Crokes management with Robbie Brennan and all the lads there. That I just think that the more it goes into the championship as well, I do think that this will start to impact Naas. I probably would lean to Crokes on that basis.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to see how it turns out anyway. And then moving from Leinster to the one game that was on in the Connacht Football Championship, it was the semi-final, and Knockmore, the Mayo champions, beat Turlestrand, the Sligo champions, Knockmore reaching their first Connacht final in 25 years, which is a stat that kind of surprised me. But they got the job done by 2 points, a low scoring, tough game. Do you give them much chance in the final now?
Look, I think they're going to be the underdogs going into the final, to be honest now. I think based off, you look at kind of at the Galway Championship, Mountbelly and Moylock beating Kerfin, who've been so dominant kind of at the All-Ireland stage for the last couple of years. And I think that defeat kind of nearly has probably made them in one of the top 2 or 3 teams that are favoured for the All-Ireland already. So they're probably be favoured over Knockmore. And then they're going to be playing Porrick Pierces as well, who've looked so kind of... they look so good kind of in Roscommon as well, beating really established teams there too. And look, they've had their time in Connacht as well. They've experienced that situation too. So I do think they'll be underdogs going in. I think as well, Knockmore might be a little bit disappointed kind of in their performance a bit as well. The fact is, like, Turl Strand kind of left us behind them a little bit too. They were 2 points up going into it with about 10 minutes to go. And look, they completely kind of left it behind them as well. And but to be fair to Knockmore as well, some good performances for them. You look, Andrew Ormes, very good player. They obviously have Kevin McLaughlin in around the middle, Shane McHale as well. So it's a solid team, but I do think that the final will be their last day out though.
Yeah, I agree. I tipped Mountbelly and Moylock to win Connacht, and then I tipped them to actually have a very good shot at the All-Ireland. It's so hard to predict which team is going to kind of go and do it, but if I was to give you now your power rankings, if you like, so obviously we picked who we think is going to come out of the provinces. We've picked Crokes in Leinster, Finbars in Munster, we've picked Glen in Ulster, and we picked Mountbelly and Moylock in Connacht. But which out of those 4 do you think is going to finally finish the job and win the All-Ireland?
Yeah, look, well, I think I'm so kind of nervous to predict that Glen and Kilcullen game, but I really think that the winner of the All-Ireland, if I had to give my early opinion on it, is coming from that Kilcullen Glen game. And I think the only other team that I'd kind of be confident in maybe making a final or giving a good crack would be Mountbelly and Moylock as well. So I do think it's going to be one of those 3 teams. If I had to be pushed and who I think will win the All-Ireland, one of the Glen, Mountbelly, Moylock, or Kilcullen.
Yeah, I think the dark horse is then at Kilmuckle Crokes, obviously with Mannion at the top of his game, and you've got, Shane Cunningham there, Shane Horan, just such talent, and to come out of such a competitive Dublin Championship, I think they can't be underestimated either. But guys, that is the Club Roundup episode 7. It's been a long one, but thank you for listening to it. We hope you enjoyed it. Luke, thanks for coming on.
No worries. Great to talk about it.
All right, guys, that is the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed, and until the next episode, take care.